When the author says weird is the goal, you know you're in for an interesting time. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we're going to be talking about Flight of the Darkstar Dragon by Benedict Patrick. This was a wild ride. This was one I did a first chapter of, and I was very curious because the first chapter kind of set up what was happening pretty well, but basically you have Min, who is a sort of like just out of her cadet stage, and she's been promoted to first officer, but not captain, but is running a ship that was on just a simple like research mission. It was supposed to be super easy. It is a flying ship that uses like a crystal core that has magic that allows it to fly. And then all of a sudden everybody wakes up and they are just falling and they don't know what's happening. And come to find out they're not home anymore, and they're in this odd world, which we learn is called the Darkstar dimension. And that's kind of the basis and what's set up in the first chapter. And so immediately I'm like, I'm pretty interested in this because that's really cool. And I wasn't entirely sure where we were going to go with this. And the cover as well, I think, is really cool with like our Darkstar and our dragon. And the dragon literally is probably one of the absolute biggest I've ever seen depicted, where the thing is like, it actually refers to it as a country-sized dragon. It's massive. And so a really cool description there, and some interesting stuff with the dragons. But basically they find out they're in this place where rifts open up, and so odds and ends kind of come in, and there is somebody living there already as well, named Brightest, and he is kind of gets involved with them and telling them, and they find out that they're going to be stuck there, and that's kind of the big impetus, is they want to get home, but they're going to be stuck there for a while. And weird, like I said, is definitely there. This is really interesting. We get to see some really cool things because of the fact that we have these portals we might not otherwise get to. We also have some really interesting little magical tidbits and things like that as well. And overall, this is one where the concept I thought was really interesting, and I like just exploring this. And so the funny thing is, I got impatient every time we were developing the characters. And now I'm not primarily a character reader, although normally I really appreciate character development. This definitely, for me, I really enjoyed this because it was a cool concept. I just wanted to explore that, and so I didn't care as much about the characters and the development there. I'm like, no, just get back to looking at the cool stuff here as well. But there's plenty of kind of the cool stuff to go around. There are a few things that I feel like it focused weirdly on, and it did end up being really relevant, but there's this kind of game which seems like it's sort of like a more complicated chess or something, called Eshok. And if you're really good at it, sometimes the pieces will just kind of become sort of like invested and become like magical, and just, they don't necessarily do a whole lot, they'll just glow, but legends say like, if you're like the master player, you can have a piece that even moves on its own, that kind of thing. We focus a lot on this game and the pieces to it, which I imagine maybe there's more like this is the first in this world, but I think there's more books here, so maybe there'll be more of it later. But I found that to be a little bit tedious, even though it was relevant. Like I said, I will say. Once again, I kind of feel like with this book, it was a very quick read. It was very quick and easy to get through. And I feel like anything that took me away from just exploring this world and the other, worlds through portals had me kind of impatient. So I feel like that's a double-edged sword, because the fact that that's how invested I was in this really cool and interesting world, that's all I wanted to see. But then when we focused on other things, it was kind of like, eh. And I feel like partially the characters were, I mean, they were solid, but a lot of the side characters just kind of seemed a bit one-dimensional, and the decisions that they made on a dime sometimes felt like really. But I think a lot of that's just to keep things moving, because this is a short book, and it's just nice to have something short here. That's why I decided to do this one. There are books I did the first chapters that I'm more interested in overall, but looking at this thing, it's not even 300 pages. It's a little over 200. It's so quick to get through, and it's nice to have short books, and it just was really cool. I like books like this when they're just kind of exploring something different. And obviously, portal fantasy is a thing, but this is specifically with these rifts and these different kinds of things. And so, there's things like Rift War, that also involves some of these ideas, but just kind of having this like dumping ground. It reminded me definitely of a few things, and I know that stuff like that's been explored, but you're doing it with a fantasy setting and with some very specifically unique fantasy elements as well here too. I won't get into it too much because I don't want to spoil anything, but you get to do a lot of stuff, and it gives it sort of a sci-fi feel as well too, because of the fact that we're going through these different worlds, and so it's just this kind of mix. It has some definitive fantasy elements, it has some sci-fi feeling elements, and overall it's cool. It's a cool book. It's a fun, quick read. It's one I recommend checking out if any of the concepts sounds super interesting. Like I said, I think this is just kind of one of those like quick reads. Like, it didn't blow me away. I think this was a decent book. But the concept is what pulled me in, and that's what I was really interested in. Characters, I was a little less into. Some of the other bits with the plot, I was a little less into. I just loved the concept, and the more we found out about the world, the more we were exploring and looking at different things, the more invested I was. So it's kind of one of those books where I was very enthusiastic about this. For certain reasons, based on my taste, and so this is one of those ones where like the rating doesn't necessarily reflect the things I liked as much. It's like, I think it's a decent book. Like, the things that I liked were great, but otherwise, it was kind of just fine for me with it as well. So one I recommend checking out, especially for a quick read. It's one I did enjoy and had a really good time with. So definitely one worth checking out. But really, those are my thoughts on Flight of the Darkstar Dragon by Benedict Patrick. Just a nice, fun, kind of random read for me. And hey, can always have more dragons. So there'll be more dragon stuff coming up here soon too as well. So we'll have that coming up. That's it for this one though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description as always for the Wizardly Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.